Here is a Crest 8600 series ceiling fan. This is one of at least 3 videos we're going to show of this particular fan. The first one will be here in the kitchen so we can see how it operates on an 8-foot ceiling with the stock, 2 or 3 inch rod. The second one will be shown in the living room on the 2-foot rod. And then the third one will be a comparison between this 8600 and this 8600. There are quite a few differences, enough to the point where I think it might even be a different OEM. Here's the box that it came to me in. I do believe this is the original box, and I also believe it was never used. It does look like the picture, sans the finish being antique brass and not polished brass. Here are the 2 finishes that were available, and then on the side it shows that it also came with either cane or stencil blades. And antique brass or bright brass. Out of these 2, the one on the right here is more similar to the one that was in my aunt and uncle's kitchen. It's not identical. The light kit is the same style, although it's a very generic style kit, so that's not saying much. But the shades were different on the one that my aunt and uncle had. I remember the chains being very short like this, and it was the same kind of 5 lights with a smaller globe in the center, but the shades were very plain, basic, ribbed shades. These shades are much fancier than the ones that were on my aunt and uncle's fan. These have kind of a pattern on the outside here. It's not just circular. These are ribbed all the way around, and they also have a beautiful amber tint to them. These are some of the nicest light shades I've ever seen. They look beautiful on or off. And I was just thinking that those ridiculously inefficient GE, I think they were called candle glow incandescent bulbs that I showed a couple weeks ago, those would probably look amazing in here because those bulbs also have an amber tint to them. So I'll have to put those in here and see what they look like, and maybe I'll have to go back and buy another box of those, even though I said I wasn't going to buy any more because they're so inefficient. And we don't know if the shades that were on the fan at my aunt and uncle's house were original or not. It's very possible they were replaced at some point. I think it's kind of unlikely because that house was purchased in the 2000s. The fan was not out of style, with a million air quotes around it, in relation to the rest of the kitchen. The rest of the kitchen was clearly from the same time period as the fan. The cane blades were still on, downward facing. I highly doubt that the shades were replaced because they went out of style. I suppose one of them could have broken, and then maybe they couldn't find any more of these shades, so they were all replaced to make it uniform. I have no idea what the context was. Maybe they were replaced, maybe they weren't. It's kind of become evident that there were quite a few variants of this fan. There were Kenmore branded ones that had different blades but were generally the same thing. There were ones that had a different motor pattern but were also generally the same thing. I have seen white and brass versions of this exact fan, but that's not pictured on the box. So there's clearly quite a few of these out there. Maybe there was one that came later on in the 90s with a different style light kit. This light kit is more of an 80s style to me, but I think that this sold in the 90s. We'll check see if there's a date code on the information's tag in a minute. So I'm still not convinced that this was the exact one that was in their kitchen. I also don't remember that fan saying Crest on the switch housing. There was no brand name on that fan anywhere. There was no brand name on any of the fans anywhere in that house. And at the time I was too young to think to look at the information tag on top of the motor to try to find out, how it was made that way. So I never even knew what the make and model of this fan was up until very recently when I saw some pictures of it in the box and I said, oh, it's a Crest 8600. There's the Crest logo on the switch housing. The other thing that's different about this one than the one at my aunt and uncle's house is that the cane has a pink backing to it, which I don't think I have ever seen before anywhere else. That's really quite unusual. Here's the informations tag, and it's facing inwards on the fan, so I'm holding the camera backwards and upside down. So if it's a little shaky or not in the picture quite right, I'm struggling to line this up. But anyways, it says, let me tilt this so I can read it a little bit. It says, oh man, that model number's long. 08615 RB52-1, and it's dated January of 1992. 85 watt motor, so it's fairly powerful, and it's made in Taiwan as well. These Taiwanese made ceiling fan motors were pretty decent earlier on. I don't know if they had gotten cheap by the 90s, quite possibly. A lot of things started to get cheap by the 90s. So this is actually more recent than I thought. I really wouldn't have put this much past the 80s. Wood grain was certainly still in fashion in the early 90s, but I feel like this even would have been a little bit dated looking in the 90s. Particularly this shade, that kind of really, really warm amber tone and stuff started to fade away in the 90s. It still existed, but this is like really extremely 80s to me. I don't have a speed control hooked up to this yet because there wasn't really intended to be a fan here quite yet. This is only light dimming controlled, so the fan is just always live. So we'll start with the light first just so we can see what that looks like. I have 7 watt S11, or no, no, that's just totally wrong. I have S14 11 watt bulbs in here, and it's just such a really nice, cozy, inviting, soft amber glow. When you don't have a dimmer, which ironically we do in this case, when you don't have a dimmer, these bulbs are perfect, in my opinion, for ceiling fans because it's just enough light to illuminate the fan, but it's not to the point where you don't want to look at the fan. It's not too bright. It's very comfortable on the eyes still. I also like to use clear bulbs in the ceiling fans because it adds a nice bit of flair to the finish, especially polished brass. This finish has got a decent amount of shine to it as well, so it kind of is picking up. You can see the reflection of the filament in some spots. I think that looks very nice. Might be able to see the pink to the cane better now. Oh, I'm so hungry. This is such a nice fan. So all we can show is the 3 factory speeds. I'll switch it back to forwards and we'll start up on low. The motor's pretty quiet in this one. I don't want to keep talking about the other one too much because we're going to have a dedicated video for that, but this one is definitely quieter than the other one. Now, I remember the one in my aunt and uncle's kitchen was very quiet also. So it's very possible that this is the same one that they had with different light shades, or at least this was the same OEM, different variant. I don't know. It's kind of a mystery. And kind of a fast low too. I'm an extreme when it comes to the lows. I like a very, very slow low, like 20, 25 RPMs tops. So this is way off the charts for me, but in a, average industry average perspective, this is pretty typical. This is probably around 70 RPM, pretty typical low. I don't have power information here for this. In terms of airflow, it's not much. I can feel a slight breeze coming down, but it's unimpressive. Certainly don't really feel anything other than directly underneath the fan. Maybe a slight draft here and there around the room, but it's probably only detectable because it's so cold and it's making me chilly. These are not powerful fans, and I remember that about the one at my aunt and uncle's house. I remember that fan was extremely disappointing in performance, and at the time I didn't understand why, because I figured there's so many blades it should move more air. But I distinctly remember that fan was particularly not powerful, and it was flush mounted, so the performance was just like horrible on that thing. But this is very quiet to its credit. There's a slight hum that resonates through the ceiling, but nothing major. Yeah, very, very slight hum. The hum does increase as you go up in speeds, which kind of makes sense because the motor's outputting more power. On medium, it's a very weak breeze. It's almost like a low on a more respectable performance fan. If I come all the way across the room, I can actually feel a little bit of air kicking up against the wall. It's not an impressive amount, but it's there. It's more than I would have expected for what's coming down. It is a very smooth breeze, but it just doesn't have a lot of velocity. So maybe it's making its airflow, through volume rather than velocity. The instruction manual, at least for the other one, I'm not sure if this one does the same thing, but it lists specifications for airflow, and on the other one it listed something ridiculous like 7 or 8,000 CFM. No, actually I think it was, one of them was 8,000 CFM, because I remember thinking, oh, the Lasco 3733. Let's see, does this one have, this one doesn't seem to have a spec sheet. No, it doesn't even list RPMs or anything. I'm fairly convinced that these were made by two different OEMs. There is a spare parts ordering here. You can buy a switch for $4, the light switch for $4, the blade brackets for $4, the blades for $4, or the hardware bag for $4. The glass is $3 a piece, or $4 for 2 pieces, $5 for 3 pieces, and $6 for 4 pieces. I don't know if you can buy the center globe or not. Interesting, you could buy spare parts. Yeah, I don't know. I really think there's got to be two OEMs at play here. All right, now let's go to the high. And things start to get a little bit noisy on high. There's quite a bit of air noise. but not all that much air. The air coming down is like, it almost goes into the center of the fan. It's a very strange air pattern. I feel more air standing here than I do standing here. It's almost like the air doesn't get strong until almost halfway in. At the end of the day, there's just too many blades. This was never destined to work good. Yeah, across the room here, there is actually a respectable amount of air coming up the wall. I don't know how, because it barely feels like there's any air moving, but I can feel plenty of air standing up against the wall. Now, this particular scenario might be giving the fan an advantage because the air is like kind of tunneling over here, you know, in a concentrated area, and it's coming over here, and I can feel it very strong right here. I'm not sure if we'd get the same kind of feeling in an open area. I guess I could come over to this side of the room and check, and come over here and see if I feel it up against the wall here. Get this chair out of the way. It's about equidistant from the same, you know, over here to over here. I can still feel air kicking up the wall. It's definitely not as strong, so I think that maybe the layout of the cabinets or whatever over there is is giving the fan a benefit. I can feel air kicking up pretty much everywhere, but it's a very, very gentle amount of air, very gentle breeze. Certainly stronger on the other side here. Yeah, it's actually quite respectable over here, but just in this one corner, and nowhere else is it really. Well, I guess over here too, these two corners, but not really anywhere else. Runs pretty smooth. The blade clock is not horrible. One of the blades is out, but the rest of them are pretty reasonable. Oh, the motors are different too. That one's ventless, this one's got vents. I'm almost completely convinced that these are different OEM. This is just such a nice model. Even if I didn't have the nostalgia to it, this would probably still be one of my favorite models. It just looks fantastic. Almost fell. Not the fan, me, I almost fell. Let's see what the airflow is like on the floor here. It's actually more powerful down here than up at the fan. Yeah, some fans work more off of velocity than volume, others work more off of volume than velocity. I don't quite understand how the two aren't like related directly, but there's definitely a difference I've noticed. I've tested enough fans at this point to tell, and the number of blades pretty consistently moves air very differently. The 4-blade models tend to be more gusty with higher velocity, and then the more blade models like 5 and 6 tends to be more of a gentle, smoother airflow. Does it work out to be the same CFM at the end of the day? I don't know. I think the CFM ratings are kind of a joke. They're pretty consistently inaccurate and unbelievable. Okay, I'll put the light on briefly so we can see what that looks like with it running. This light is very dim, so it doesn't really screw up the picture too much, but it's making it a little bit overexposed. We'll come back and show it at night also, get some shots at night, and better capture the light in the dark, I think. I always like to look at the cane while it's running. I remember that on the Genoa that my other uncle had in his computer room. Okay, we'll go ahead and cut it off now. Oh, and it is a three-way light. The chain is having some problems. This has got a couple days of hours on it, so the bearing should be broken in by now.